Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews under the deck text. On this episode of the Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on one of the commanders from Zendikar Rising, Tazri, Beacon of Unity. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. The best way you can help support the channel is my Patreon. For just $1, patrons get early access to scheduled videos on YouTube, and higher tier patrons get access to the VIP section of my Discord server as well. You can find a link to both down in the description too. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Tazri is a 4/6 human warrior for 4 generic and 1 white. However, she has a Wooburg color identity because she has an activated ability with the other 4 colors. With the cost similar to Reaper King's casting cost, you have so many different possible ways to pay for Tazri's ability. Ideally, you want to spend the least amount of mana to activate it by just paying the colored mana requirements. What's great about it is that you can potentially get 2 cards out of it for just 4 mana. Granted, you're looking at the top 6 cards of your library for up to 2 of either a cleric, rogue, warrior, wizard, and/or ally in any combination. This is the direction I wanted to take the deck in. This deck isn't necessarily a 5 tribes deck though. However, the best hate bears in the format have at least one of those creature types, so Tazri is an amazing way to help dig through your deck for those hate bears. This also pairs well with her cost reduction ability. That's right, you pay 1 generic mana less for Tazri for each creature in your party. So with a full party, you only have to pay 1 white mana for Tazri. This is even better for this deck since you don't necessarily need white mana to pay for Tazri's ability. Since most hate bears are white, that means that the white mana not used to activate her can be used to pay for those hate bears. You can even make the ability even easier to activate thanks to Zirda the Dawnwaker, Biomancer's Familiar, and Training Grounds. If you manage to have all 3 of these on the board, then Tazri's ability will only cost 2 generic mana or 1 mana of any color that isn't white to activate. Even one of these is enough to really accelerate the deck, since you'd essentially only be paying 3 of any combination of non-white colors. It should be noted that even though this is a Stax deck that takes advantage of the party mechanic, it is not a CDH level deck. As mentioned in the Zendikar Rising episode of A Flight, Mons over on CDH TV has been working on a CDH build for Tazri, which you can find in the link above if you're looking for a beefier build. Since Tazri's abilities are linked to the hate bears of the deck, let's see what they are and what they're going to use not only to slow down and police the table via stacks, but eventually help us take the victory as well. Glow Rider, Leonin Arbiter, and Thalia Guardian of Traben tax the cost of certain spells and abilities. Unfortunately, Thalia isn't a party member, but she's too good a card to pass up in this deck. All 3 are cheap enough to be a nuisance for the table early on, and the first 2 being clerics can also help with an earlier Tazri casting. Aura of Silence also taxes opponent's spells, but is on an enchantment instead of a body. This isn't really an issue though, as mentioned earlier. Although Tazri can help us dig for the creatures faster, the deck is not just a party deck, but using the party mechanic to further boost the stacks and control aspect of the deck. Even Mind Censor, Grand Abolisher, and Drateth Magistrate shut down effects altogether instead of just taxing them. The Bird Wizard limits how deep opponents can tutor through their deck, so this is just brutal to cast in response to a tutor or someone cracking a fetch land. Drateth Magistrate can prevent opponents from playing their commanders if they're still in the command zone. This can be especially backbreaking for opponents until they can get rid of it. The Abolisher helps us be at relative ease during our turn since opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities during our turn. This is especially useful if we want to win by combo, which we'll see soon enough. These 3 are also more party members too. Deafening Silence isn't on a body similar to Aura of Silence, but is still a great stacks card in the deck. It does also affect us, however, since we're mostly casting creatures anyways. It also doesn't affect one of our game-ending combos, so that's important too. The final stacks piece is Containment Priest. We can flash this in response to Fatnings getting cheated on the battlefield from anywhere. What's great about these stacks pieces that have flash is that we can keep mana open to either sink it into Tazri at the beginning of the end step before our turn, but if we have to flash in any of these answers, we'd have the mana to anyways because all of these spells are white and Tazri's activated ability is with all colors except white, so it's a great synergy. Who says white is bad in Commander? We can also respond to threats on the board or the stack with our party members. Goblin Crater Maker, Kazali Pride Mage, and Glenalendra Archmage have a built-in self-destruct button to deal with problems. The Goblin can shock a mana dork or hate bear, or it can destroy a colorless non-land permanent, meaning that it can not only take out an artifact but a potential Eldrazi fatty as well. The cat can destroy an artifact or enchantment, and the fairy can counter target non-creature spell and then return to potentially counter a future one. All of these party members that can be chosen with Tazri's activated ability. Nimble Obstructionist is another party member that can be used as a response to activated or triggered abilities. This is great to counter Planeswalker ultimates or other abilities. Since you have to cycle it to do so, you also get to draw a card as a bonus. Thieving Skydiver and Treasure Nabber can steal artifacts, albeit the merfolk has to be kicked to do so. Fortunately, the kicker cost is just 1 generic mana if you want to steal a Soul Ring or a Mana Crypt. That being said, if there's a spicier artifact on the board, then you can steal that one instead. The Goblin temporarily steals all the mana rocks that are tapped for mana, so if all 3 opponents tap their Soul Ring that turn, you gain control of them until the end of your next turn. However, even though all of these creatures are party members used for responses, the deck needs generic responses in order to ensure we can deal with threats as well as protecting our own threats and combos. Fierce Guardianship, Swan Song, Dovin's Veto, and Mana Drain are the counter spells of the deck. The first one has the potential of being cast for free without drawback, so it's naturally the best of the 4. Mana Drain comes in second since the free generic mana it generates can be used to help activate Tazri during our next main phase. Dovin's Veto usually comes in clutch in Counterspell War since it can't be countered itself. Deflecting Swat is also technically a free counterspell since it could be used to redirect a counterspell to some other spell on the stack. However, it can also be used to redirect any other spell such as Spot Removal or Time Magic if it's printed as target player. Flawless Maneuver, Heroic Intervention, Boros Charm, and Teferi's Protection are used to protect our board state from board wipes. Even though the first of these can only protect our creatures from board wipes, that really isn't an issue since the vast majority of our Stark spaces are on bodies anyways. Besides, it can be cast for free anyways, which is quite the bonus. Beast Within and Generous Gift are the deck's spot removal spells, and you really can't do better than destroying any permanent at instant speed for just 3 mana. The opponent might get a 3/3 for their trouble, but that token is not trouble to us. However, the best response will always be an Overloaded Cyclonic Rift. Not only will this bounce all of our opponent's non-land permanents, but since we might have so many creatures on the board, it also helps us swing in unopposed with our Hate Bears. Being able to control the board and slowly but surely sending our creatures into the red zone is one of the multiple ways this deck can win, so Cyclonic Rift pulls off double duty here. Before we discuss the win cons of the deck, let's see how else we're going to be digging through our deck besides Tazri. We can take further advantage of her party ability thanks to Notion Thief and Alms Collector. These are yet more party members that can be flashed in much to our opponent's disdain. Both of these prevent opponents from drawing all of the cards they thought they were going to draw from their massive draw spell or effect, and instead we get our cut from it. The Rogue is the better of the two and just amazing to cast in response to a wheel or a draw X spell or effect. Dark Confident and Ghostly Pilferer are passive ways we can draw cards. The Wizard draws us a card during our upkeep, but we have to reveal it and potentially lose life to it. But that's fine because the deck is rather light in casting cost. The Rogue will draw us a card whenever a spell isn't cast from a hand. This includes the command zone, so anytime a commander is cast from there, we draw a card. We can also potentially draw a card off of it getting untapped if we pay 2 generic. Oakham Adversary and Timna the Weaver draws cards from combat as well. The elf has the potential of costing only 2 mana to cast. It also has Death Touch, meaning that it trades with whatever blocks it. It draws us a card whenever it deals combat damage, which is great for always sending it to someone's face. Timna will draw us a card if we spread our attackers around, so being able to potentially draw 3 cards for just 3 life per turn off of her is amazing. We can also draw cards without depending on our creatures thanks to Rhystic Study. It is definitely an annoying spell, but that's usually when it's on the opposite side of the board. It's even more annoying in this deck with the other taxing effects in it, so opponents will more often than not refuse to pay the 1 if there are other things are going to be taxed too. Growing Rights of Illamac is similar to Tazri when it enters the battlefield, but it only digs 4 cards deep and you can choose whichever creature you want from it. In this deck, it will be very easily transformed into Illamac Cradle of the Sun, considering that most of our creatures are cheap and easily found thanks to Tazri. Having a better Gaia's Cradle on the board is amazing since we can potentially tap it down for a ton of mana and activate Tazri with it. With 7 creatures on the board, it's enough to activate Tazri once. Scroll Rack is busted in this deck. We can use it to swap cards in our hand with the top of our library. If we do this before activating Tazri, then we can bottom deck those cards we didn't need, while also potentially digging further through our library since we drew first and then used Tazri. So the synergy with Tazri is just crazy here. Demonic Tutor and Coveted Prize are tutors, which is the best kind of card advantage. Demonic Tutor is clearly the better of the two since it's more reliable. However, it's fairly easy to assemble a party with this deck. Even though there aren't many warriors in it, Tazri herself is a warrior, so she's already 1/4 of a full party. This makes this spell potentially only cost 1 black mana, and then you can cast a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less for free. Now that we've seen how we're controlling and annoying the board with our Stax party, let's see how we can actually win with this deck. Thassa's Oracle and Spellseeker are 2 party members that can potentially end the game once you recruit them both. Spellseeker is used to tutor for Demonic Consultation, which notoriously and nefariously combos with Thassa's Oracle. Just cast it in response to Thassa's Oracle and name a card not in your deck, and you just won the match. This is the combo win con of the deck. Thanks to them being wizards, you can potentially dig through the deck relatively quickly with Tazri to find them and then use your control magic to protect your combo. It's even more viable thanks to Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, helping you generate infinite colorless mana with Basalt Monolith. Both are great on their own in the deck, especially since there are other mana rocks and mana dorks that get boosted thanks to Kinnan's ability. Kinnan himself can also help us dig through our library for non-human creatures if Tazri were offline somehow. In any case, you can also go infinite with Grim Monolith if you also had Zirda in play. If Grim Monolith is out of your price range, then consider the gold-birded version, which is a small fraction of the cost. In any case, Zirda not only helps us reduce the cost of Tazri's effect, but it can also be used to generate infinite mana with either monolith. With infinite colorless mana, we can pay 8 each time to activate Tazri's ability infinitely many times until we find both Thassa's Oracle and Spellseeker. Since the rest of the cards are bottom deck, we don't deck ourselves this way. In any case, the deck is running shared summons, which can also be used to tutor for both Thassa's Oracle and Spellseeker at instant speed. So for just 5 mana, you can have your combo win in your hand at the beginning of the end step before your turn, and then win afterwards. However, as I mentioned earlier, combo isn't the only route to victory. We can sink a ton of mana or potentially infinite mana into Biomass Mutation to create creatures that are essentially infinitely large and just smash face with our hate bears and win that way. Them being on a body is useful in more ways than simply being party members that Tazri can recruit with her ability. Being an instant also means that we can use this spell defensively or in response to blocks in order to kill opponents' blockers. Likewise, we can use it in response to no blocks, or on an empty board after an overloaded Cyclonic Rift. Triumph of the Hordes is another way to win via combat, albeit with much less power necessary than with Biomass Mutation. That being said, if we're already pumping our hate bears or swinging into empty boards, we can easily take out the table with Infect. We can also significantly pump our board with Beastmaster Ascension. This helps make our creatures even harder to get rid of while also allowing us to apply more pressure to life totals whenever we can get through. It also makes opponents need to block them and we can take out creatures as well. It also makes attacking with Tymna on the field much less worrying. Besides combo and aggro, we can also win Math's End. Since we're taxing the board and slowing down our opponents, we have the luxury of running all 11 guild gates in order to try and win with Maze's End, if the game drags on too long. Due to the social contract in almost every pod, the lack of will for players to destroy lands means that more often than not, Maze's End will be a very reliable win con. Even then, it can also help to somewhat ramp since you can get lands with it onto the battlefield. Earlier I mentioned the deck having Mana Rocks and Mana Dorks. Besides the aforementioned Grim Monolith and Basalt Monolith, the deck's running Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, and Arcane Signet. The first two are amazing at helping to pay for Tazri's activated ability, while the Signet is just an all-around great Mana Rock in a 5-colored deck. As for Mana Dorks, the deck's running Avacyn's Pilgrim, Elves of Deep Shadow, Birds of Paradise, Llanowar Elves, Finhorn Elves, Elvish Mystic, and Noble Hierarch for the 1-drops. Yes, running so many creature-based mana acceleration leaves the mana base susceptible to board wipes, but they're cheap and plentiful, and this is a creature-heavy deck. If we're able to get an early Tazri and be able to activate her quickly, we can really speed through the deck. Bloom Tender and Faber Elder are the last 2 Mana Dorks of the deck and are included because they have the potential of tapping down for 5 mana, which is amazing for activating Tazri. We'd have that 1 white mana left over to afterwards potentially help cast one of the hate bears picked. The Tree Folk can also be a 5/5 Vigilant Beater, which is a great bonus. Smothering Tithe is the last card of the deck and the last Stax effect too. As I mentioned earlier, with so many taxing effects in the deck, if you manage to accumulate a few of them on the board, players might not even have the resources to pay for the optional ones like this one and Rhystic Study. So at the very least, you might be able to get up to 3 treasures per turn around the table, which is a great way to help pay for 3 of Tazri's 4 colors for her ability. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running all 11 gates as previously mentioned, all 10 Battle Bond lands, Command Tower, City of Brass, Mana Confluence, Reflecting Pool, Exotic Orchard, Cascading Cataracts, Crystal Quarry, Ancient Tomb, and Temple of the False God, as well as one of each basic snow-covered land in case anyone is running anything that benefits us for it. Actually, the deck is not running any basic mountains because if anyone plays a Blood Moon, our non-basics will tap down for red anyways. Ancient Tomb and Temple of the False God are great at paying for Tazri's ability, while Cascading Cataracts and Crystal Quarry are great at turning generic mana into the colors we need to be able to activate Tazri much easier. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Tazri Beacon of Unity. I was considering going for a CDH build, but instead opted for a slightly less powerful Stax build that's more of a 7 or 8 instead of a competitive 9 or 10. The deck is still a lot of fun to play, and while it can be annoying for your opponents to have to deal with your Stax effects, it's not so oppressive as to completely lock down the board. Even so, the deck has ways of protecting its annoying board state, while you're able to slowly but surely, or maybe even quickly and effectively, obtain any of your routes to victory, whether it be combo, aggro, or Maze's End. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby, and happy brewing.